It's about a young girl that's kidnapped and presumed murdered. Her mother is a complete addict of sex, drugs and alcohol, and is portrayed as this heartbroken woman. Hello and welcome to the new episode of NELP, the podcast. I'm Bellissi. I'm an independent artist, a music producer and writer. In this Behind the Music episode, I want to take you through the process of writing my latest single, She's Safe, and how the story came about. I'm a real fan of storytelling in music. I love it when I'm taken on this 4-5 minute journey. And it was those types of tracks when I was growing up that I fell in love with. You know, songs like Cats in the Cradle that take the listener on this sad 20-30 year journey and under 100 words. And I found that fascinating and magical. And I love tracks like that. And so it seemed natural to me to try and attempt that when I began songwriting. And it's something that I've always done. And going back to sort of the Arrbie years, and in particular a song called Chess, you know, that's a song that starts out with this, you know, these two lovers in their 20s and takes them right through up until their sort of 80s, 90s. And it does have a sad ending. Even when I listen to it now, it does bring tears to me. And it's magical how those songs really do come to life. And so on to She's Safe. This track started with a very, very simple guitar riff. I mean, it's just two chords, and they're power chords at that. And I'm quite a novice when it comes to sort of instruments, really, because I'm an independent artist and I have to play all these instruments. And, you know, I do classify myself as a multi-instrumentalist, but there's no way can I play all these instruments, you know, to the skill that some of these guitarists are out there, or drummers out there, or pianists. So I do tend to keep it quite basic. And in the case of She's Safe, it is literally just two chords. And I've got the mix in front of me now, so I'll just play those two chords and how they come about. And these what you're hearing now is completely unprocessed. It is just that raw guitar, those two chords. And so I had this riff, and I started singing the melody almost straight away. And so what I do in these cases is I'll grab my phone and I'll record it straight away. When I'm in the studio, I do have the phone set up on record just in case I do come up with something, because I'm a bugger. Once I've started playing a riff, I forget it. 10 minutes later, I can't remember, and I'm walking around thinking, oh gosh, that was really good. And I try to recapture it and I can't, it's gone. So I record it straight away. And whilst I was doing that, the melody was already coming and I was already singing She's Safe. And I didn't know why or what it was about, but I just kept doing it. So I recorded it down, and then at least I've got it then, you know. My phone's full of hundreds of these little riffs and melodies that I've got, so I can use, you know, in the future sometime. So once I had that melody, that riff down, then I can forget about it for now and sort of concentrate on building that song. And so I first began by recording the guitar track down, just those sort of two riffs, and then I found a few more little chords that would add in there, and it was very, 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 very basic. And I did that, and then I put some drums on it and a little bit of bass. Again, as I've talked about before, that's not necessarily what will appear in the final track, but it's just to give me a foundation so when I do come to write the song, write the lyrics, you know, I've got something to work with, and then later on I can change things or manipulate things, or indeed get rid of them and start again. And once I began with those, you know, that simple guitar, you know, that was the verse. And then once I got to the chorus, I could hear what was needed. And so I picked up the electric and I added some gain on there and some distortion because I wanted to lift that chorus up. The verse is very melancholy, and I wanted it to lift up. I didn't really know what it was going to be about or anything yet. So I recorded that down, added in some more heavier drums and some more depth to that chorus. And then I could start to focus on the actual story. And as I've said before, that's my favorite part of songwriting. You know, I do love coming up with the riffs and the melodies and everything else, but the actual writing, which only lasts a very, very short amount of time, is my favorite part. And I've always said that I've never wanted to explain my lyrics. I think there's something magical in songwriting, and that the actual lyrics or story shouldn't be explained. And it's something that I'm not overly comfortable with. And I'll tell you why. It's like, when I first played a song for my trusted group, my trusted ears, as I call them, you know, I've got this track recorded down, and I'll hand it out to a few people. And just for fun, I always ask them, what do you think that's about? And I always get different stories, different answers. And I love that. And I leave it at that. I don't tell them what it is really about. You know, it can be ruined. And sometimes I've written some of the saddest songs that I've ever written, and I hand it out and say, what do you think, you know, that's about? And they come up with this really happy story. I'm like, fair enough, you know, I don't want to ruin that for them, so that's theirs to own now. And you know, there's so magic in that I've listened to songs before and I thought I understood what it was about, and then I've watched the artist talk about it and find out what it is, and the track's completely ruined. You know too much about it, the magic's gone. You know, the house lights have gone up, the illusion is over, and now it's too visible. It's boring now for me as for you as a listener. So I don't really like to explain the track too much, but for this purpose, for this exercise, I'll talk about She's Safe and the process behind it and how that story came about. And so a few days prior, probably a few weeks actually, prior to writing She's Safe, I watched a movie called Gone Baby Gone. And it's a movie with Casey Affleck and Morgan Freeman. And spoiler alert, if you haven't seen this movie, I am going to may ruin it for you. So you might want to go and watch the movie first. And so in this movie, it's about a young girl that's kidnapped and presumed murdered. Her mother is a complete addict of sex, drugs and alcohol, and is portrayed as this heartbroken woman. But then you start to find out that actually she was abusing this child, or certainly neglecting this child. And so that's starting to go around my head. And then running parallel to this story in the movie is this police chief played by Morgan Freeman, who's lost a child a few years back. And so here's the spoiler alert. The child is taken from this mother and is destined to live with this police chief. And I won't explain the actual end, so I won't completely ruin it for you. But basically, they try to take this child away to give it a better life. So that's going around my head. And then running parallel to this movie there's news reports and documentaries about sort of very high profile abductions that have happened many years ago. And so that's now going around my head and starting to circulate. And so when I started riffing, you know, those two chords, and I started singing She's Safe, you know, I started to imagine this little girl, you know, with the movie that I watched and all this, you know, other news reports of abductions and everything else. It was just going around my head, so I had to come out somewhere. And then I began to picture this little spirit that's been living a life of abuse, and you know, and then this hero that's come along and taken her away, rescued her, if you like. Now, when I first started writing, at least at the very start, the hero for me was a physical being. However, I could easily interpret that the hero had entered the girl's life sort of post-mortality. And certainly when I give the track out to the trusted ears out there, one of them did come back and said, you know, and I said, who do you think the hero is? And they said, God. You know, it was post-mortality, and she's now been rescued. She's now safe. And so I leave that actual interpretation up to you. The setting, I pictured this sort of rundown sort of cabin in the woods kind of thing, and I was picturing a very hot sort of European climate, hence the sort of the roaches roaming around and the heat is drying up the air. And her parents are only concerned with their own entertainment, and the little girl was just a burden to them, just something that halted their fun. And there's even a reference to drug abuse in the song, and and even that they drugged the child so they could just put that bit away and go on with their lives. They can go out and party and get laced. And I wrote this track in one session, as I often do, and it took 10 to 20 minutes. It come really, really quick, certainly the first draft. And that's pretty much the way I always write. I like to get that done as quickly as possible. 10, 20 minutes, that's enough. Any longer than that, and I start to lose the story. I start to lose the feed then, like I've talked about before with the universe, they've got these ideas and it's coming through to you. If I take too long and start to manipulate it too much, then I've lost that original story. And certainly if I go away from a songwriting session halfway through, then I've lost it. It doesn't mean it won't become a song, but it certainly won't be the one that I started out with. So I always try to do it in one session, and certainly with She's Safe, it was around 10 minutes or so, just that writing those initial lyrics. And as I said, when it came to the chorus, I wanted it to lift, because the lyrics were very, very sad, this girl of abuse, but the hero had come along. And so I wanted the chorus to emphasize that, so hence the guitars and the drums are rising, the distortion on the guitars and the sort of heavier drums, and even the vocal change. I wanted that to display that she is safe and that the hero is there and he's rescued her. And most of the chorus vocals were riffed. I wrote down, like in that 20-minute writing session, loose. But as I've said before, when I come to recording vocals, I do use what I've written down as a blueprint. I will try to sing what is there, but I always find that the truth comes out when I sing. So if I start singing a different line, I will roll with it. I won't cut it or start again. I'll roll with it and then listen through and see if it works. And if it doesn't, then I'll do it again. But in the case, in She's Safe, most of the chorus lyrics are completely riffed, and certainly the last chorus is the original riffed vocals, and I left them at that because that was the truth for me. That was the hero singing out, and she was safe. Job done. And overall, I was really happy, and am still really proud of that track and how it's turned out. And I don't think I'd have changed anything about it. One thing, I did find it very haunting for a while, and I find that both bizarre and tragic in some ways, that when I do write these stories, they do come to life. And some of them are really happy, which is great. And some of them, like this, are really, really sad. And they do stay with me, for a little while. And I did find myself sort of dreaming about, this abductions and all stuff like that. So I'm glad it's now done and it's out there. And yes, I'm talking about it now, but once this is over, I don't own it anymore. It's now yours. When it came to the mixing of She's Safe, it wasn't too big of an ordeal, really, and I wanted to keep it very, very simple. And for those that know me and know my recording and producing process, know that I hate mixing. It's the worst part for me, and only because it's so hard, and being an independent, I have to do it all by myself, and I will always do it by myself. And, that's where it falls, a lot of other artists, where they do give it out to a producer or a mix engineer, there is, there's a lot of good in that because they're unattached to it. So they've got no emotional attachment. They didn't write it. They don't really care about it. So they start again and then produce something else. But when you're producing your own work, or certainly mixing your own work, it's very, very hard because you're still in it. So I do like to go away for a few days, sometimes weeks, and then come back into the mixing. But with She's Safe, it was very, very simple, and I tried to keep it as simple as I could. And so I began, as I always do, with just basic leveling, making sure everything's got its place, all the instruments are sat correctly. And then I start to work on the vocals. And the first mixing stage is really a pre-mix. So I'll just get everything ready. And then sometimes the vocals, will need more work. They need backing vocals, overdubs and things like that. And so this is really just the pre-mix stage. And then once I've done that, then I'll do it again. And then this is really the first mix. And then it's more leveling, making sure everything's right, EQing and just basic stuff like that, a little bit of compression. And then later on, you can start with the artier stuff, the delays, the reverb, the stereos and things like that, making it a little bit more entertaining in some ways, if you like. And then that was it. It was done. She's Safe is now out there. Go and have a listen and see what you think of the story and what emotion you think and who you think the hero is. I love hearing from people and what they thought of the song and their interpretation. And I'll never argue with their interpretation. I love to hear it. It's just my own sort of curiosity. I've got no interest if you don't think the mix was very good or anything like that. You can keep that to yourself. That doesn't help me as an artist at all. So, but yeah, go and have a listen and we'll have a chat about it. That'll be fab. Go and have a look on my socials and come and follow my journey. And if there's anything else you would like to hear about in the future on future podcasts, let me know. And thank you so much. Take care. See you soon.
Believe me when I say, believe me when I say, not everyone likes this, not everyone likes this, not everyone likes this, not everyone likes this, it's just me, Bellissi.